we get started, I want you guys to know that we're going to be going back in time roughly a month, then back to today, because obviously it was also this issue of improper food at Ramadan, and then more and more demands, and then demands that quite frankly make you think that there's more demands on the way, which by the way was the ultimate end game. But I'm also going to be explaining to you exactly what happens to the city of New York as a result of everything that you're seeing, and I want to finally explain it in detail towards the end of the video. But we got a lot to get to before we get to that there, so make sure you guys stick around for the full video, and let's get
And if you are not overwhelmed by the beautiful black faces that are present here today and surrounding City Hall, something is profoundly wrong with you.
Now, hundreds of illegals gathered outside of City Hall today ahead of a New York City Council hearing on what's called the Black Migrant Experience. Now, the goal presumably was to better understand how the city is addressing language access barriers, cultural competency challenges, health needs, and other roadblocks that the so-called newcomers face.
I am surrounded right now by hundreds of illegal immigrants from New Guinea and also from Haiti, all right? So majority single men from Africa. We have been told as American citizens that all of these people are coming into our country because they are seeking asylum, but every single migrant that I've spoken to today has talked about how they are here simply to
This
work.
right here was the scene in New York City as a bunch of African migrants, mostly from Western Africa. Let's just say that they're not exactly happy with how the city of New York is treating them. Basically, what's going on is, once again, people who aren't from the United States, people who are not citizens, are just making crazy, ridiculous demands once again. Obviously, somebody's going to show up here and say that that was quite xenophobic, but as you guys obviously saw at the very beginning, it's not just people from South America, it's not just people from Mexico or Central America, or the Chinese nationals that were mentioned in this video here at the very end. It's not just that, it's now African migrants. Now, guys, really quick, before I get started on this, I want to go ahead and say this right now. I've been saying for a while that eventually what would happen is that all these groups would find themselves in the same spot. After a while, what one group wants would conflict with what another group wants. And I've said this on several occasions. The Hispanics that come over, and by the way, I've been around Hispanics my entire life, a lot of them care more about the immigration aspect as far as the aspect of, I don't know what it is. Oh, yeah, that's right, legalization, citizenship. Black voters typically tend to care about the fact that they're, how do I say, in a much poorer environment, so they obviously want better overall economical, and I mean economical opportunities, and not just that, but they also realize that they need more of a hand up, yet, of course, then, it ends up turning into a handout a lot of times, mostly due to the bad actors, making other ones look bad. But then again, that's also true of whites, too, because we have a crowd that does that as well. But as I've said before, at some point in time, each single group will eventually conflict with one another, and of course, it's going to lead to absolute chaos. Well, before we get into this story, I want to kind of go back roughly a month. The reason why I want to go back roughly a month is because this issue has actually been going on for a while. It actually started when most of these Western African migrants, who, by the way, are Muslims, had this little issue when it comes to Ramadan.
Asylum seekers claim the shelters housing them are disproportionately underserved, especially as migrants need to fast for the holiday.
Tonight, CBS 2's Christy Kalishian has the story from Queens.
This should be a time for peaceful reflection as the holy days of Ramadan continue. But for asylum seekers at the Belrose shelter in Queens, it isn't.
We need help. We really need help.
Abdoulaye Ba from Guinea, West Africa, has been in the U.S. for 7 months now. He's been living at the Belrose shelter in Queens with other single men, a majority of whom are West African Muslims, only able to eat just before dawn and after sunset during Ramadan.
So when the refugees get the food, they have to say to themselves, do I sustain my health or do I stay true to my religion?
Volunteer Muhammad Mazar and asylum seekers
I'll show you guys the rest of this and then show you what's being said right recently, seeing how it is that Ramadan's pretty much over with. I want to go ahead and say this. I have talked about the food issue in New York. I've talked about the fact that migrants have been given free food. I've talked about the fact that a lot of this free food is coming from charity organizations within the city itself. And then, of course, you had the situation where the wokesters got involved and their food was basically kicked to the curb by the Venezuelan migrants in the city of Chicago. The thing is this right here. You're living at the behest of charitable organizations, people who are donating. I have no idea why. And of course, there are also some who think that the migrants are best left in their own countries. Like I've said before on several occasions, a wall needs to be built. Of course, somebody's going to complain and say that it's xenophobic. Don't really care at this point in time because I've already gotten pretty well knees deep into this video. But the point is this right here. Like I said before, after a while, you're going to get to the point to where you're going to be demanding way too many things. And after a while, people are eventually going to get tired of it. This right includes the normies out there on the road, out there on the street. And what I mean by out there on the road is those ones I talked about 2 days ago who had to deal with the protesters in San Francisco, completely blanketing the highway, the Golden Gate Bridge, with their carcasses. So that way people could not get to work and people could not get to potentially hospitals, all that type of good stuff there. After a while, this type of stuff starts to impede with people's everyday lives, and they eventually get frustrated, and they eventually show you who the hell they are deep down inside. Or that anger, take your pick. But there's also something else too, another component that needs to be talked about.
Law, which is forbidden. Before being asked by security to come back to the shelter Friday, a group of asylum seekers came out to show they're wearing the same clothes and shoes they arrived with. Local advocate Kabir Javed shares how he's seen the city respond to requests to have religious groups step in to help, as others have with shelters that don't predominantly house Muslims.
When the Muslim organizations ask them, hey, make us the same, give us the same credentials as Catholic charities, there's no funding for them.
A city.
There it is, right there at the end. You got to fund this, you got to fund that. That is what the hell this is really and truly all about. You need to fund our religion, you need to fund our way of life, you need to give us free food, you need to give us this, you need to give us that, you need to get all kinds of other crazy stuff that, quite frankly, the taxpayer, quite frankly, can't afford. Because you see, while I love to tell you that the people in New York City voted for this by voting for this current administration, I also have to say that after a while, the other taxpayers in the country are going to eventually get frustrated with this. Now, typically what tends to happen is that these areas that are outside the big cities, they typically tend to go redder, which is exactly what's kind of going on. Of course, we're expecting that now because it's a presidential cycle coming up. And even if the current Republican nominee does not get elected president, more than likely the Senate map favors Republicans and also the congressional map would favor them, adding to their very, very slim majority, which, by the way, they're about to lose because Republicans who are currently in Congress don't seem to understand that the current Speaker of the House has got an extremely slim majority, and therefore he's basically got to kowtow to the Biden administration at every single level. It sucks to do, but obviously you got to know how to play the game. Then you get this situation like I'm about to show you guys here in a second in the city of New York, where you've now got African migrants, most of them are Muslim, are now complaining. By the way, I'm not saying Muslim in a bad text. I'm just giving you guys their religious way of life, so that way you guys can see why it is that these people are complaining about the food that they're getting on Ramadan. Now, as I've said before, this food is being given to them, donated to them at the behest of charitable organizations and the taxpayer, and you would probably think that these people should just suck it up, which actually they should suck it up. They don't have any actual rights. You're being given free food, and you're also being given debit cards that've got all kinds of money on them to where you can actually go buy your own food. But then again, at the same time, there's also some in the crowd who's going to complain about not getting the debit card, and they're obviously going to get pissed off at other people who've got the debit card. But like I said before, this situation right here just screams the incompetence that we're actually dealing with at this moment in time. You guys obviously saw the very, very beginning how it is that you've got people out here screaming and hollering and screaming anti-blackness, when in reality, what it really and truly is the fact that people just can't do anymore. We've reached the end of the line, and now you show up with demands. But let's watch this.
Once Fox 5 has been sharing the stories of migrants and their lives here in New York City. And now today, City Council held a hearing on the experiences of black immigrants to get a closer look at how the city is addressing a variety of issues. Fox 5's Stephanie Bertini has more.
Inside City Hall, the treatment and experiences of black migrants at the forefront.
Black immigrant newcomers have faced especially stark barriers.
The City Council's Committee on Immigration and the Committee on Hospitals held a joint hearing to discuss the disparities many black migrants are reporting during the city's asylum seeker surge. It's a topic Fox 5 News has been exploring in our Migrants in America series. Black asylum seekers in New York City have been leaning on community activists for help.
Some of the shelters are really hard for some of our folks.
As I've reported, cultural differences, language barriers, and racism are some of the issues black migrants say they're facing. In our series, we featured the voice of activist Adama Ba because she's helping countless black migrants in New York City daily.
I'm pretty sure you're already thinking to yourself, wow, these people are complaining about racism. Duh. This is kind of what's going to happen. However, I do need to go ahead and stress this right now that the people who come from West Africa, people who come to actually migrate to the United States from Africa, these are the type of migrants that you would probably want to have. Not saying anything against Hispanics at all. I love Hispanics, and the vast majority of Hispanics, especially Mexicans, they work their butts off, and they actually work work very, very hard. Now, I'm not saying this be pro-immigrant all of a sudden. I've told you guys before that where I'm from, there's actually a lot of immigrant influence as far as being around people who are from different countries, mostly Mexico, and of course, people of color. I've told you guys on several occasions, you're never going to break me of that, but I've also said that immigration does need to be, or at least the immigration laws do need to be enforced, and a wall does need to be built. A lot of that is because when you go down south, once you go south of the Mason-Dixon line, outside the very, very large cities of the North and the Midwest, and of course the very, very west of the nation, these areas typically tend to be much, much more diverse than people want to give it credit for. I'm just simply putting that out there. There are a lot more black people in small towns in the South than there are up north. Just putting that out there. Also, same thing with Hispanics, especially those who are Mexican. Like I said before, I'm all about legal immigration. I'm all about people who, quite frankly, are actually working to help the nation out. But once you get people who are just going to be given cards that are economic migrants that are just going to send the money back to their native nation, to their family members, and not put it to the U.S. economy, it's obviously going to be a bit of a problem. But the point is this right here. Now you're out here and you're demanding free stuff. You're out here demanding free health care. You're out here now demanding not just free health care, but now free hotel rooms, free room and board as a whole. Some of these areas, by the way, I can tell you right, don't even have showers, so I understand their complaints. But the point is this right here. You shouldn't have been here to begin with. You need to go out and do it through the actual system itself, the actual right way to do things. You know, apply, all that type of stuff. Apply from your own country. It's one of the reasons why is that remaining in Mexico was such an extremely effective policy. But of course, the current administration, the current Democratic Party, they needed a brand new voter base, which, by the way, would replace the Americanized black people because they realized that a race that has an extremely high abortion rate, extremely high rate of sexually transmitted diseases, an extremely high obesity rate, extremely high disease rate, an extremely high incarceration rate, an extremely high murder rate is not exactly a group that, quite frankly, they can rely on come future elections. They have also figured out that the vast majority of Hispanics who are coming over, if they do choose to legalize them, while they will vote Democrat in their first election, after a while, they will begin to start pivoting to the right because they always notice something when they get here, and that thing that they notice is that the current Democratic Party, which has gone full-blown woke, extremely pro the alphabet community, extremely pro the things that most Hispanics are not in favor of, they're starting to realize that said Hispanics are probably going to be like, you know what, man, I don't want to vote for this. Maybe the Republicans were right. They're not the ones who look communistic. These people over here do. Maybe I'll vote for them instead. I'm just saying that one-party rule, I did make a video on this, could in fact backfire for these people.
She was among those at the table today.
To hold the mayor's office accountable. This invisible population that actually has been ignored.
Outside City Hall before the hearing, asylum seekers and those helping them during this migrant crisis came out to stand up.
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
New York City public advocate Jumani Williams moved by the sheer numbers.
I'm speaking as a son of black immigrants. This is a proud moment for me. This is very beautiful. I'm sorry.
They're asking for equality. At the hearing, the issues reported included that the city imposed limits on shelter stays, 30 days for singles and 60 days for migrants, are disproportionately affecting black.
Disproportionately evicted African immigrants.
The response on this from the administration.
Migrants from Africa are disproportionately single adults and adult families. Around 81% of migrants from African countries currently in our care are single adults/adult families, compared to the overall average of 22% for the entire system.
As we've reported in our Migrants in America series, many black migrants from countries including Senegal, Mauritania, and Haiti, for example, speak French or their native language, and that makes everything more difficult.
That right there was the Fox report. That was a report from Fox New York. Now, of course, there's another report that's also an update on the Ramadan situation and the food, which I'll play for you guys here in a second. The point that I'm trying to get across is that the more and more migrants that you bring in, the more and more that you'll see you're not going to be able to please them. Something else, too, needs to be said, and it was said in that previous clip. We've come here to hold the current mayor of New York accountable, the current mayor's office. I'm going to explain, and I mentioned this in passing by earlier on, I'm going to explain what that means and what's probably going to happen to that city in the future as far as his actual leadership is concerned, because it's going to just get more and more and more chaotic, as I'll explain here momentarily. But I want to go ahead and get back to the story on the Ramadan situation and the food, so that way you guys can see that, yes, trying to please these people is just going to lead to more and more problems, because the point is this right here. I played the very, very first thing from a month ago. This story here that you're seeing with the African migrants who are complaining about their current situation now, this happened roughly a day ago. But this one right here I'm going to show you happened over a week ago.
3 months ago. He's one of the 3,000 asylum seekers at the Randall's Island Humanitarian Center, breaking fast in the shelter's cafeteria.
Sometimes good food, sometimes no good food.
Tonight, he says the food is good. It's Eid al-Fitr, celebrating the end of the month of Ramadan. More than half of the migrants here are Muslim.
We've made sure that all the food is halal to make sure that everybody, again, feels welcome.
But during Ramadan, some migrants disputed that. At the Creedmoor shelter in Queens, volunteers claimed the only halal meals served were vegetarian.
It's a political. Technically, yes, they are getting halal meals because half of the meals are vegetables. So all vegetables are halal.
Throughout the month, Kabir Javad and his Majid cooked and served hundreds of their own meals for migrants right outside the shelter.
People can't take it anymore. They're like, wow, we fasted the entire day and it's the same exact garbage.
The city spends about $14 a day on meals per person, which adds up to about $350,000 a day at all of its congregate shelters like this one on Randall's Island. So if migrants don't know the cafeteria meat is halal, that's an expensive misunderstanding. What can the city be doing to make sure people know the options available to them?
Yeah, we will help you and make sure that everybody knows. We've worked incredibly hard at our humanitarian centers to make people feel welcome through the food that we're offering them.
During Ramadan, the city also tried to make migrants feel welcome with weekly prayer services at the Randall's Island shelter.
New York said whatever cultural and religious and social background that you come from, we'll protect it and we'll celebrate it.
City leaders say they plan to continue and expand prayer services to all of its humanitarian centers, even when the holiday is over.
Educational catering to religious catering to food, catering to... You're catering way too damn much. You see, after a while, what happens is that once you cater to a group so much, after a while, the complaint level just gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. You need to kind of like, I don't know, maybe put your foot down and say, no, we're not going to go this far. You already had one guy talking about, well, we need money for these institutions because we need them because they support the Catholic Church, the federal government. Oh, they need to support Muslims. You're only about maybe 2% of the population total, okay? Right now, we are pandering to not only that group, but we're also pandering to the alphabet community, which once again is only about 2% of the population. We're pandering to very, very small groups, and quite frankly, the taxpayer can't flip the bill. That right there is what the hell is going on. But of course, people in New York City, they voted for this. So people in New York City, their vote, their decision to vote for this nonsense is now affecting the taxpayer who does not live in New York or who does not live in Chicago. Like I said, I'll explain what eventually happens in the near future. But let's get back more to current events.
Well, these are economic migrants. These are not refugees, and we all know that. That's just ludicrous. But what else did you find?
Well, Laura, I went and I spoke to a lot of these people as well as I could, many of them speaking French. But what I found is that they were here to plead with the city for more resources. The same thing that we find every single time when we come to New York. More migrants, more people asking for handouts. I was at one of the local NGOs, and one of the most shocking things that I've discovered this trip is that not only are they giving these migrants free tickets throughout the entire United States, but also around the world, because that is how desperate New York is getting to get these migrants out of their city. But because it is such a nice setup here, right, with the sanctuary city, free hotels, free food, free daycare, free medical care, they want to stay here.
Wow. Well, some of the illegals did not appreciate you one bit, Savannah. Watch.
I'm sorry, but this is the United States. We have the First Amendment here. We are allowed to actually film. Okay, well, you don't get to tell me what I can and cannot film. You guys are out here in public today. So, welcome to the United States of America here. Where are you guys from? Where are you from? Where are you from? No, nobody wants to talk to me about where you guys are from?
Okay, I'll get back to Savannah Hernandez here in a second because she's been on the ground in New York. Savannah Hernandez, by the way, is a very good on-the-ground reporter. She works for Frontlines to Turning Point USA. And this is one of the main reasons why it is that I find myself not believing polling information that comes out from the liberal media, because obviously there's a groundswell happening in areas that are not being talked about or confirmed. The point is this right here. You can obviously see that these migrants out here don't want to actually say anything to reporters, which is kind of sort of understandable in a way, given the fact that a lot of these migrants, by the way, don't speak English, but they actually speak French. Some of these, by the way, come from Haiti. Don't even get me started on Haiti. Right now, you've got a situation in Haiti where you've got leadership that actually cannibalizes humans. This right here is the beast that you've allowed in this nation. This right here is the problem that you've allowed. And at some point in time, it's going to lead to a powder keg, which I've never really and truly fully explained in my past videos on this topic. But here's the thing. That explanation is coming up in a second because, as you guys can see, you've gone from Hispanics coming over, Venezuelan gangs coming over, demanding this, demanding that there, to those in the black community who are obviously jealous about the brand new migrants being put ahead of the line. They're obviously upset. They're obviously jealous about the situation. After a while, the people who are of the alphabet community, they're going to see that their needs are not being met. Then you're going to see that white women's needs are not going to be met. Of course, I've also talked about white women in particular getting sucker punched in the city of New York. No cops, no police presence, 5 more NYPD classes, which, by the way, have been shut down, and the sanitation department of New York also being shut down. It's about to get really chaotic. Now, given the fact that it is the month of April, going into the month of May, meaning it's about to start getting hot, and you're going to have a lot of people on the streets, meaning that the situation is going to get pretty daggone gamey. And now you've got African migrants from West Africa who are obviously complaining, and you've also got to go on top of this, the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which, of course, is going to have all of these groups there wanting to vote for Joe Biden, wanting to give out their demands, their list of demands for the Biden administration to meet, which is probably going to lead to chaos in that city, reminiscent of 1968. But let's continue.
Savannah, were you ever afraid there in that group, or it's just people were kind of annoyed and irritated?
Absolutely, Laura. There was a huge language barrier here. These are all single adult men that are convening. Again, as I walked into City Hall today, or I guess the area in front of it, there were thousands of single men here. I think I saw maybe in total 10 to 20 women in the crowd. It's majority men, and they're all here to take the resources of New York City. It seems extremely unsafe. And I've talked to a lot of New Yorkers as well who are extremely upset about the situation. Oh, yeah. There was even a grandmother who was outside of this NGO who told me off the record, she was like, I'm in mourning right now. Please do not record me. But an illegal immigrant just killed my granddaughter. So I'm extremely upset about this situation. And then, a couple minutes later, I have a Russian immigrant leaving this NGO singing about how he's getting a free trip to Chicago.
Yeah, this is all paid for, by the way, by the U.S. tax dollars, because those NGOs are getting federal tax dollars to resettle and tend to the needs of the migrants. Forget the people in New York have to deal with the filthy subways and the crime and so forth, but you definitely have to tend to the folks from all parts of the globe.
I have told the taxpayer, the people who watch this channel who are from New York City, and I say this because I care for the city. I know it sounds like I dislike the city. That's not true. I think New York City is a hallmark of America. One of the first major cities in the country. I think it's actually the first big city in the country. The story of that city is actually beautiful. But you hear New Yorkers and you hear people from New York talk about the city of New York being such a tough city, such a gritty city, toughest city in America. I don't believe that. I don't believe that not one bit. These people happen to get the most offended of anybody online, or those who live in that city if you criticize. I hate to say this, but people after a while, they're just not going to care anymore. They're just going to tell you to your face. And some people are just going to walk away instead of telling you how screwed up you are, because some people who, quite frankly, can't take criticism, these people who, honestly, if you just simply point something out that's messed up about them, after a while, it becomes the point to where you can't talk about them at all. So what happens is they end up just finding themselves more and more isolated. After a while, people just don't care. So when you do need a friend, or you do need somebody to speak to at some point in time, you're going to find out that friend is not there because of what the hell you've done to yourself. Not only what you've done to yourself, but what you've done to the taxpayer of the rest of the nation. You're turning the entire nation itself against you. All right, that is what the hell has happened. Never mind the fact that not only have you turned the nation against you with your vote, you've also turned the nation against you with your selection of district attorney, Alvin Bragg. I got to bring this up all the time. Killers from New York ended up in Arizona. The state of Arizona will not release them back to New York because they killed people in Arizona. Criminals from New York end up in Arizona. Criminals from New York also end up in Georgia, like in the case of Lake and Raleigh. Killers from New York end up in other states because the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, doesn't do his job in the city of New York. Not a good look for the city of New York. Not a good look at all. And now you got African migrants who are now demanding all kinds of free stuff and then screaming that you are racist for not giving them. This right here is what you've created. Now, with that right there being said, though, let me go ahead and tell you the next two things, the things that eventually happen in this city. I want to go full Tim Pool, but I ain't got a choice but to go full Tim Pool and talk about that CW phrase. Many people in this country, when they bring up the phrase Civil War, they don't seem to understand that it's not a civil war between the right and the left. It's never going to be that way. Conservatives go to work every day. Conservatives ain't got time to go to war with a bunch of radical leftists unless, of course, a bunch of people show up to their job site and try to shut it down. Conservatives, by the way, we're 90% of the gun owners, 90% of the people who actually can make force in this country, and the military politically leans right, which tells me even if the military was used against the American people, there'd probably be a massive mutiny involved. If anything, you got more to worry about from law enforcement in big cities, but still at the same time, there's obviously some murkiness there. By the way, I've actually stayed away from this topic for a very long time, but I'm going to be bringing it back, especially when we talk about media manipulation and what would actually happen in this situation, because scenarios will eventually be a part of the channel itself. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of work. As a matter of fact, I may even have to create a backup channel to this one right here to put said content there. I haven't decided yet. Like I said, my head has always got a million different ideas going at one time. But still, the point is this right here. There's never going to be a civil war between the right and left. It's not going to happen. However, what could happen is you could find yourself in a situation where you have a political civil war, a lot of riots, and a lot of people get hurt, a lot of people get killed in these very, very large blue cities. By the way, YouTube, not an advocation at all. I'm just simply pointing out what the scenario calls for. Well, these people are obviously people who are falling into the category of identity politics or the identity groups. Next thing you know, you've got brown Muslims going at it with black Muslims. You've got black Israelites going at it with white Muslims. Next thing you know, you've got the B's fighting with the L's and the L's fighting with the T's and the T's fighting with the G's. Next thing you know, you've got black people fighting with Hispanics. Next thing you know, you've got Cubans fighting with Puerto Ricans and then Puerto Ricans. That's what these people have created. They've created a situation where you've got too many groups coming to the table to demand something that they want. After a while, the people in charge, guess what? They can't provide. So eventually, they get voted out, which is the second part, and I mean the second part of this entire equation. I don't think Mayor Eric Adams survives re-election. Let's go back in time to the city of New York. So in New York, you had Ed Koch. He was the mayor for a very long time. From Ed Koch, you got David Dinkins, who was an extremely weak mayor, very weak. Crime shot through the roof. Then you had Rudy Giuliani step in, and he did the best he could, and the most he could fix was getting Manhattan, which obviously is the tourist hub of New York City, got it back on track. And then Michael Bloomberg, at least for the first and second term, he governed like somebody who had at least some form of common sense, continued a lot of the Giuliani policies, like stop and frisk. And, of course, he probably wouldn't have allowed the crap that's going on today. And, by the way, I'm no fan of Michael Bloomberg. The guy's a gun-grabbing nut, and I think he needs to just I'm not going to say it anymore. But the thing is this right here. Then eventually you get Bill de Blasio. The guy's pretty much a communist, and he runs that city into the ground much, much further than it was already being ran, which, by the way, Bloomberg was adding on to what Giuliani did, and the city was actually being fixed. Matter of fact, a lot of the people who I've ran into who've moved from New York City, not New York State, but New York City, they moved in response mostly to Bill de Blasio. They weren't going to go to Andrew. They weren't going to go live out in the rest of the state because then the problem becomes Andrew Cuomo's, which Cuomo at the time was the governor, but still at the same time. Now you got people leaving upstate New York and coming down to where I live at, and they're all saying the same thing. The place sucks. Kathy Hochul's the problem now, but Eric Adams still sucks. Adams is incompetent. He's very, very dumb. He's currently under investigation. If you think single white women or whatnot are going to vote for him come 2025 or 2026, when I think New York's election is, next mayoral election is, you're smoking crack. What'll happen is somebody like Letitia James, who's been pumping the drum or banging the drum to take out Trump and running as an extremely anti-white progressive, they're going to get in office and they're going to demand a bunch of promises. And what the hell is going to happen is that these promises that they're demanding are not going to be met. It doesn't matter who the president is, whether it's Biden or Trump, it's just not going to be met. So people are going to get angry and they're going to turn on her. That right there, my friends, is the future of the city of New York. It eventually devolves into such a damn hellscape, nobody even bothers to even want to go in that city. Pretty much almost like what it already is, a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah. I would point you to Ezekiel 38:39, but I think that me not being a Bible prophecy channel is probably not appropriate for me to do so. The point is this right here. You have allowed way too many devils into your city, and what a lot of these people don't seem to realize, especially people on the left, is that these cities are coastal cities and can be cut off. And if something was to happen, the current regime that is governing the nation will have to make a choice. City of New York or the rest of the country. Just say you're going to find yourself out there by yourself. With that right there being said, guys, please tell me your thoughts. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please share the video. Please stay out in the comment section. And I'll see you guys later.